How are y'all doing? This is Dave Kennedy. I am at the United States Marshals Museum in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and we are going to have a great time today talking with practically our next door neighbors. I'm talking to Casey Faber, Cody Faber. He's a interpretive park ranger at the Fort Smith National Historic Site. We'll be talking to him here today about some different things about the National Historic Site, about the Marshals Museum, and the similarities and differences and stuff like that. Before I get a chance to get into that, though, a couple things just as reminders. As always, I want to let you know that you can help support the Marshals Museum by either going online to our regular webpage or through Facebook and getting to our webpage and either like buying a personalized brick that we are going to end up setting out in our property. Or you can also just go on. We have a GoFundMe campaign that's continuing to run as we continue to try to get closer and closer towards our goal of opening up the museum, which along those lines, as we've said over the last month or so, we're continuing to publicize that the museum is not open to the public yet. The museum is here. The building is complete. We have our Hall of Honor dedicated, but we are still doing our fundraising for our museum experience that's going to help tell the 230 plus year story of the United States Marshals Service. And so as part of that, just this week I've had a few people come to our front door and rattle the door and want to come in, and I get a chance to talk to them and explain what the situation is and why the museum is not quite open yet and what we're doing to make sure that we do that, because believe me, we want to share this story with you as much as you guys want to have it shared. So with that admin out of the way, I am going to go ahead and switch over to Cody. And Cody, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you so much for having me on. This is a lot of fun. We've tuned in and gotten to listen to you a couple times. Some of the other Rangers follow you on some stuff, so when you invited me over, I was really happy about that. So thank you. It's good to be here, man.
Well, you guys have definitely been on my list as one of the some of the folks I want to talk to. I want to talk to you. I want to talk to Lauren. For those who don't know Lauren, those who don't know the National Historic Site in Fort Smith. It's a national park. Well, I don't know why I'm talking about it. I'll let you talk about it. Tell us about the National Historic Site.
All right. Well, like I said, the National Historic Site, we're the Fort Smith National Historic Site. We've been a park since 1961. So, like Dave said, we're just a couple scant blocks down the road from one another. We cover roughly about 80 years of history here, going from roughly about 1817 when the U.S. military arrives to build the first Fort Smith, all the way through Indian removal processes. We deal heavily, of course, with Indian policy, federal Indian policy, and then we are used during the Mexican-American War, the Gold Rush, and then we're a big bone of contention for both sides in the Civil War. And so the fort is used by both sides. And then following that is kind of where we tie into the Marshall Museum. So in 1871, the military left and abandoned Fort Smith. And in 1872, during the Mexican-American War, the Western District of Arkansas moves in. And that's where we start seeing the U.S. Marshal Service playing a large role in Fort Smith and basically having jurisdiction over what is most of Oklahoma at the time. The deputy marshals and the U.S. Marshal Service would bring criminals back in that were involved with federal crimes and bring them back to us. And so it's and I'm sure we'll talk about some of the myths and stuff. But if you watch True Grit and Rooster Cogburn and even Hang 'Em High, you've gotten into some of our stories in there and that have dealt directly with Fort Smith. And so we have a great relationship with the U.S. Marshal Service as far as our stories go and some of the highlights of our storyline. So it's a great park. I love working here. We cover such a broad range of time that we get to do so much stuff and have a lot of different books in our library about a lot of different subjects and everything. So anyways, that's us. We're happy to be here. Yeah. 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 That's right. That's right. That is correct. Yeah, we only cover roughly about, like you said, based from 1872 up until 1896. So yeah, we only overlap for a slight thing. I think a common misconception is the U.S. Marshal Service is only about the Wild West out here, and that's not the case. As you said, you guys cover such a broad range of time before and after what the Wild West is. It's not just Marshall Dillon out here. Rides a good-looking horse, and it's a cool story, but there's a lot more to it than just our little sliver of time. So we do cover a lot of stuff before that. So yeah, good. That's a good point.
Yeah, and something I just realized, and something that a couple of people online just pointed out to me is in the middle of trying to fix the audio stuff on my end at the earlier part of it, I ended up actually muting my microphone, and so even though everybody heard the introduction on everything, they didn't hear my comments just now about the overlap between the time frame of it. But yeah, you summed up a little bit of what I was just saying. They didn't miss anything. So with that, like you mentioned Rooster Cogburn, I know that both your guys' site and our site, we all have stories about Rooster Cogburn. I know we've had at least one person show up here at the museum claiming to be a descendant of Rooster Cogburn, who is, in case you're not aware online, a fictional character created based on my understanding, Cody, is an amalgamation of a few real deputies who were here in the area, but still I recommend the book True Grit to anybody who wants to understand Fort Smith in the 1870s, because you can really read that book and understand what it was like here.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, even though Charles Portis wrote, a story that not involving real people as far as the main characters anyways, it's still a fantastic book. There's a reason they made it into a movie twice. Yeah. It's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful movie. Of course, there are some small historical inaccuracies that we historians watch and pick out. And that's not quite right. But overall, it's a like you said, it gives a great view of what Fort Smith was like, what Eastern Oklahoma was like, and yeah, we hear that too. People come up. I've been here 12 years at the National Historic Site, and we've had. I've had a few dozen people come up and be like, "Oh, my grandma said we were kin to Rooster Cogburn, or something." And I often joke, and you got to burst that bubble gently. You don't want to just jump right in there and be like, "Well, your grandma lied to you," or something like that. That would come off bad. But you're right. He was based off some other characters. Portis did an amazing amount of research looking into, what the deputy marshals did, what some of them were like. I mean, Rooster Cogburn's a ex-Civil War veteran. He fought in the war. I mean, he was a very rough character, and you see guys like that, and there was and the bad guys he fought and so forth. Like I said, Portis did a really good job of tearing into it. And as far as the name went, everybody asked about the name. That was kind of just a cool in a letter between the superintendent and Charles Portis. This is back in the late 1990s. He basically said that he thought he wanted like a kind of a plucky, kind of tough Scotch-Irish kind of name, so he chose. He was going to be Cockburn, and then changed it to Cogburn, and so anyway. So okay, it's a great story, but yeah, historically not true.
And speaking of great stories, Sharon Theobald, she is a regular viewer of the cast. She's over in Tennessee. She asked, where can we find the true story? Mike Sheriff, I think you and I both know Mike Sheriff over in Oklahoma. Yeah. He's saying hell on the border. Myself, I would kind of say you've got to take hell on the border with a grain of salt.
Yeah, agreed.
A large grain of salt. Yeah. Hell on the Border, it was written by a local individual here in Fort Smith, turn of the century, and it's tainted by his view of being a man who knew some of those people at that time frame. You could read through the entire book of Hell on the Border and not recognize that there were any people of color who worked as deputy marshals. Yeah. There's no mention of Bass Reeves in Hell on the Border. There's no mention of any of the other black deputies in Hell on the Border. And there were, it's just all of the stories, it's just like all of this stuff there, like the popular accounts. You do learn, and I'm sure like you'll be able to talk about this a little bit, you do learn specifics about the building that you were in.
Yeah.
And about the gallows and about how the operations took place.
Yep.
What can you say about that, or like what's your?
Yeah, that's a good question. We sell it in our bookstore, and for the longest time it was the backbone of research for a long time, and you can kind of, if anyone that's listening has ever read like the old dime store novels, it kind of sounds like that at times, that where it's kind of a lot of it's based in reality, but you see it kind of stretched here and there to kind of tell some better stories, which I think the real stuff, you don't have to play with it to make it a better story.
Right.
But at the same time, it's a neat book to start from. What I often tell people is when they buy it, if you find a neat story that's in there that you're really interested in, go research it somewhere else to find out how much of that part's true. There's actually sections in it. I think it talks about like Ned Christie being like this wanton killer that wanted to go out and do nothing but shed blood. You're like, wow, where did they get this stuff at?
And it's like the whole section on Belle Starr that's in there.
There's a whole other myth and reality thing with Belle.
One of the single most overblown characters in Western American history.
You betcha.
Belle Starr.
You betcha. I hundreds. For every one Rooster Cogburn descendant, I've met 10 others who had an old barn or a cave in their property that Belle Starr hid in. It's amazing.
I've lost track of how many Belle Starr wanted posters I've had to turn down, explaining to the person by the way that this particular poster was printed and reprinted in the 50s and 60s as at tourist traps, and nobody ever had a bounty of $10,000 placed on their head in the 1800s.
No, it's a neat story.
I don't even think the James guy.
Yeah, right. No, there's and you're right. There is a big section in the book that's on that. I'm trying to think as far as good books, it's a little, if you want to understand a lot of what the US Marshals Service went through in Fort Smith anyways, you kind of have to understand what's going on in Western Arkansas and in Eastern Oklahoma. They're so integral, because it's not like, some people watch the movie, like say True Grit, and they think that, okay, there's this old West town and these deputies riding out catching guys. I'm like, well, there's a huge buildup to that goes from Indian removal process to the Civil War and all the horrible crime that caused, and the economic and social upheaval that would cause. And so, when Rooster, a deputy, is riding out in Indian Territory, they're going to a pretty rough place in American history. And at the same time, so some books I would recommend if you want some good stuff, again, to understand what they dealt with here anyways. I would recommend Ed Baer's book. You've probably seen Ed Baer's on the History Channel sooner or later. Has a great deep Southern accent. And he actually worked here at the National Historic Site for years, and he literally wrote the book on it. But it's Ed Baer's, it's Fort Smith, Little Gibraltar on the Arkansas.
Yep.
It's a great military book. That kind of lays the foundation for what the U.S. Marshals Service is going to have to deal with here. And then another one of our great volunteers is a good friend of mine, Jerry Akins. He wrote a book called Hanging Times at Fort Smith, and it's about the executions that take place. And you think, I want to know more than just about the executions. Well, if you learn about that, you also learn about, why were these guys being executed, or, how did the court system work here, or who caught them, of course, and that ties to the Deputy U.S. Marshal Service. And so that's another good one that's done pretty well that can kind of get you back into it. Deadly Affrays, perhaps, by Bob Ernst. There's several books out there that are great.
And Bob's research that's in Deadly Affrays, that's a book, and you have to find it. And my lights just went off here because of our power. 1 second. There we are. Some of the regular viewers of the Facebook Lives here, they've recognized that we've got a timer on our lights, so if I don't move away from my desk enough, the lights power off.
That's good. Good job, guys.
Deadly Affrays is the stories of the line of duty deaths of the Marshal Service, and it's about 10 years old now, and there's a lot of really good information in there, and it's the basis behind the information we have in our Hall of Honor here at the Marshals Museum. But in Deadly Affrays, there's a lot of good stuff that's taken from the original sources about there's 100 some stories about, this is one of the reasons why the museum is located where it is there were, of the 376 men and women who died in the line of duty to the Marshal Service, 122 died in what's now Oklahoma. And somebody's asking who wrote it. That was Robert Ernst, E-R-N-S-T. And it's out of print. We were looking at trying to help Bob get it reprinted, and it just got to the point where it became impossible for us to be able to do it, simply because the amount of money that was going to be costing to get it published. But with the you can get Bob Ernst's book on Amazon and ABE Books and some other places. You can find it. It's called Deadly Affrays. Really good stuff in there. But the so I mean, there's some good stuff out there. It's just there's no real that, and then also I'll always come back to. Let me get on the pull this up. I've got showing everybody right now. There's Deadly Affrays. That is Bob Ernst's book, and then there's also The Lawman. The Lawman was the history of the Marshal Service. It was written for the bicentennial of the Marshals, written by Frederick Calhoun, who was the historian of the Marshals at the Marshal Service at the time. Dave Turk was on here a few weeks ago talking. Dave started out working for Fred Calhoun. The Lawman talks, that's the history, first 200 years of the Marshal Service. Lots of good stuff in there, and a lot of it about the frontier West, because that was really so much that a lot of people had that was like the popular understanding of the Marshal Service really was tied to the history of the American frontier. But yeah, that's always a good place to start for those. The Lawman you can actually get really inexpensively for even, I think I picked up this hardcover that was done by Smithsonian Press for $10.
Oh wow!
And it's in like new condition. I was amazed that I could get it like that. But yeah, so like there's some good stuff there going on. One of the things, like with these stories that we're talking about, I know we've talked about people like Bell Star and some other things. What are your other favorite stories about marshals in this area?
Oh my! Like true stories?
True stories, fake stories, I don't care.
Oh man. Well, I grew up hardcore. No, even though True Grit and some of those books aren't real, I mean, I'm from here, and so I grew up as a hardcore John Wayne fan and some of those stuff, and so I like the Rooster Cogburn stories and all those things. But one of the things that's neat is that, like we brought up, was that even though it's amalgamation of characters, who might that have been based off of? There's some great deputy marshals out there that have some awesome stories. Perhaps one of the ones that actually ties back into True Grit has a neat story, and that's the snake pit story. There was a case where the outlaw had actually, I forgot his name, I think it was Martin Joseph, I believe, had killed a man and his wife, threw their bodies down. It's a horrible story. Threw their bodies down this pit. And anyways, the story goes that the marshals had to go down there and get the bodies out as evidence, of course, and bury the bodies. And they went and had to fight the snakes. And I love how I think it might have actually been Helen the Border who put it this way, but I loved how they wrote it in there. It was when they went in, they had to shoot some of the snakes, and they said they commenced the war on the snakes. And I just thought that was interesting how they wrote that. They commenced the war. That was a neat story. As far as some of the favorites, I think Heck Thomas is an awesome character. He's connected to so many different outlaws and so many different lawmen. He's there with Rufus Cannon, an African American deputy marshal. He's just got some huge total numbers of guys that were actually brought back in and so forth. He's definitely worth some study. He's a great character, and he's connected to Philip Kearny, one of the generals that was killed in the Civil War. Apparently, he carried his stuff. There's a whole other story there. And then I think out of all my favorite deputies, if I had to pick one, which it's hard to do, and I hate that it's kind of an odd thing to say that you have a favorite deputy, but one of my favorite studies, I guess, would probably be Heck Bruner. Who was there. Cool. Heck Bruner's just, I mean, he's the man. The guy's got so much cool stuff. Bruner, in the pictures we have of him, he's carrying this big 86 model Winchester. So he's got the largest Winchester ever made, the best rifle on earth. He's got the a nickel-plated, ivory-handled, Colt. So he's got this rock-solid pistol that's super cool. And then he's got he's involved, and some of you may be aware of there was the breakout that took place here in the jail here in our building under Cherokee Bill, where he shot a guard and tried to shoot his way out. The guards and the jailers got in a gunfight with him. Well, there was a couple deputy marshals that were on the grounds when this took place, and Heck Bruner was one of them, and they commented that he had run in there with a repeating shotgun and began firing down the hallway. Well, the only really successful repeating gun at that time was a Model 1887 lever-action Winchester shotgun.
For those who don't know what the 1887 is, if you've ever seen the film Terminator 2,
there you go.
Arnold Schwarzenegger riding along on the motorcycle with the big shotgun, and he's spinning it around and spinning it around. Yeah, that's a Model 1887. Later, it was updated to the Model 1901 to fix some stuff, but yeah. Which in that Model 1886 that he mentioned earlier, this is coming back to me being a gun guy.
There you go.
Most of the deputies at the time were carrying Model 1873s, later Model 1892s. Why? Because those rifles and carbines shot the same cartridge that their pistols shot. 44 caliber and 38 caliber, both Winchester cartridges. The 1886, it was designed as a much larger version of that. It only shot cartridges that were designed to bring down bear and bison and elk and things like that. So, I mean, it was like most of these guys, all they're ever needing to shoot at are people. And Hank Bruner's walking around with something that can go through the wall of a cabin, through a guy, through another guy, through the other wall of the cabin. So
shoot your neighbor's dog.
There was a question here. What about the books by Art Burton? Black, Red, and Deadly was his first one, and that's about a lot of people of color, black Americans as well as American Indians who were working in law enforcement across the West, not just here in this area. But then there's also Black Gun Silver Star, which is, there's good and bad in Black Gun Silver Star. The thing that I love about it is the one good biography about Bass Reeves. It's the one with the most legitimate information about Bass Reeves. However, there's my two big nits I'm going to pick with it are, one, the story about Bass going off and arresting his son. Based on this book, it sounds like Bass, nobody wanted to go after his son, and then Bass finally, after his son went off hiding in Indian territory, said he's going to take the writ and go and arrest the son. They were already living in Muskogee. They were already in the Indian territory. There's a newspaper article in Muskogee the day after the murder saying that after Benny Reeves killed his wife, he went to Bass's house and turned himself in, and then Bass took him to the jail.
Yeah.
That's all it was. And so there's this huge story map out of it. The other story that has become the bane of our existence here at the Marshals Museum for a certain extent, and people who regularly watch the Facebook Lives know my feelings on this subject, is that Bass Reeves was not the story for the Lone Ranger.
Yeah, we get that too, if it makes you feel better, Dave.
Yeah, Art makes, in the introduction, in the first couple of chapters, he makes some suggestions like, well, we think this and we know this, and this might have been the truth. And so we think about that. So in that case, Bass Reeves was the Lone Ranger. And it's like, well, he's a really great guy. It's like, you don't need to gild the lily. We already know he was a great person and the most accomplished lawman in the history of of the nation. 30 years, arrested, credited with up to 3,000 people, probably less than that. Was just an amazing person, born an enslaved person in America, and went to become what he was. When he passed away, his death was mentioned in papers across the nation.
Yeah. But
the character of the Lone Ranger was created by a couple of radio guys in Detroit out of whole cloth. They were, those are the two. It got picked up by a number of people, and now you can't get on Facebook or the History Channel without seeing something about Bass Reeves and the Lone Ranger.
Yeah. Bill O'Reilly didn't help with his input on that either. I think he talked about it as well and kind of threw that in there. That's a good point. And one thing, because we hear the same thing about the Lone Ranger bit with him, and you hit on this just perfectly. What I tell people is, and visitors to the park, is that he definitely deserves all his credit. He deserves all the cool stuff we talk about him with and all the credit he can get. What will happen is he doesn't need to have stuff made up about him. He's cooler. In my opinion, he's cooler than the Lone Ranger, so we don't have to compare him to the Lone Ranger wishes he could be Bass Reeves, not the other way around.
And really, honestly, the people who know who in the world the Lone Ranger is are people your age and my age and older.
Yeah, right.
And not even all of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And what will happen eventually is historians will do what they've done with, what we do many times with historical figures, is we will go back and we will test those theories.
Yep. And
many, many years from now, maybe 100 or 50 years from now, whatever, they'll go back and be like, wow, that's all made up. Why did they lie about that? And instead of attacking, historians or whoever who stretched that, they'll attack Reeves. And sadly enough, and he doesn't deserve that. I think, he, like I said, all his wealth of work stands on its own. He doesn't need stuff made up about it.
Exactly. And in the conversation that's going on online, Dan Mayer just popped in with hashtag Mythic Frontiers. And Cody,
good to hear from you, Dan.
Cody knows Dan personally. Dan, I would love to meet you in person someday. I agree wholeheartedly with a good chunk of what you've written in the past. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, if you ever want to have a conversation offline, I'd be glad to have it. Dan's a great guy. He's a great singer and in the band too. So there's so much in the way of myth that leads to, I'm sure it's stuff that you've had to deal with and stuff that we've had to deal with. One of the myths that I know that we have to deal with here is especially over between 4th and 5th Street in downtown Fort Smith. There's a large photograph blown up on the side of a building that is titled the 1908 Marshals reunion, and something that I've had long conversations with Cody and with Lauren, the historian at the park, and with some other folks, and we've all kind of figured out that picture wasn't 1908. It was 1917. You bet. During the centennial celebration of Fort Smith. Yep. And it was, it's just, so we're trying to, and that's not a huge thing. Whether that's 1908, 1917, that's not a big sticking point. I'm not going to get into an argument over it with anybody. But it's just that's some of the stuff that as historians, just like what you were saying, it's almost a science that we have to deal with. We take, it's a scientific theory. We take an idea, we try to, okay, what's our question about this particular subject? We research that subject. Does this hold up? Does this hold up? Yes, no, maybe so. And then we can take that on and do something with it. Yeah, that's right. It's kind of like being a crime scene investigator almost. We find these little tidbits of history, and then we try to do our absolute best with a good conscience to fit those pieces back together. And we deal with an enormous amount of responsibility in that regards. We only know maybe this much of all history that's happened. Yeah. And we're trying to apply these things and speak to the public, whether it's through, face-to-face meetings or through historical objects and stories. And trying to make those deeper connections through people through an enormous amount of difficult, touchy subjects. Fort Smith alone, one thing that, we deal with everything from firearm issues to capital punishment to racial tension, Indian policy, and the list goes on and on. Those are some hot button topics. Some of which very much hot button right now. And a further study of the US Marshals Service, a further study of Fort Smith and perhaps, government oversight in the justice system, can lend us to a lot of credibility and understanding what took place, and not just the men's story or not just a white story, and so forth, of trying to tell a broader story that encompasses more people and trying to heal some of these issues. I didn't mention Civil War, but the Civil War is, that's a huge topic right now. And we deal with that too. But the U.S. Marshal Service covers a lot of these bases. And the more we understand about perhaps how these, very brave men and women interacting with one another is perhaps how we can do a better job of helping ourselves now. It's all these moral lessons. Right. And we deal with that heavily here. And along those lines, It's like we're talking about, like, it's not just like a white history or women's history or whatever. I'm surprised more people recently have not made more of a big deal about the recent Supreme Court case decision regarding there was a murder trial in Oklahoma that the person who was accused was he Cherokee or Choctaw?
I think it may have been Creek, actually.
Might have been Creek? Okay.
I may be wrong.
But yeah, I can't remember specifically which of the 5 tribes, but he was a tribal member convicted of a crime by the state of Oklahoma, and he fought that all the way to the Supreme Court and won based on all the different previous treaties. Okay, Mike Sheriff is saying Creek. All the different standing treaties that were in existence and all the standing court decisions, that the state of Oklahoma had no authority by which to charge him for that crime because he's a tribal member. He still falls under the agreement between the federal government and in that case, the Creek Nation. And so, I mean, like, we look at this as the Marshals Museum going all the way back to jurisdictional questions involving the tragedy at Going Snake.
Yep.
And Mike's saying, yeah, the Treaty of 1866. And so, yeah, and so, like, following the Civil War, there were a number of, the federal government renegotiated. I'm doing quote fingers. I know Cody can't see me right now. But renegotiated treaties it was a punitive step following the Civil War. And in a lot of these different cases, so that a lot of the redone treaties were 1866, 67, that time frame. And then 1872, you have the tragedy at Going Snake, in which you have the deadliest day in the history of the Marshal Service. And you have to start looking at all the questions of jurisdiction, of treaty rights, of what authority the federal court had to go into Cherokee Nation, and everything that led to the biggest, bloodiest gunfight in the history of the American West that the Army wasn't involved in. So, like, you end up 11 people dead, 15, 20 people probably wounded. You end up with just huge number of combatants between the two sides, probably 30 or 40 people in all told. But in a lot of that, really, there's somebody's going to write a huge dissertation at some point about that in relation to treaty violations. I mean, it's just there's some amazing there's some amazing gold to dig in that vein.
Yeah, amen.
But so, Cody, I know that we could easily, we filled up 30 minutes, and I know that we could easily fill up another 30 minutes just chatting back and forth. We'll have to do a part 2 of this at some point.
That'd be great.
But
anytime.
I know that you and I have scheduled stuff today. I know that we've got other things that we have to do. We get back to our phony baloney jobs when we would rather just sit here and chat over the computer and let other people watch us talk. So, I want to thank everybody, though, who has popped in. I want to thank everybody who has really been active today on the commentary. We've had people commenting on Bear's book and Little Gibraltar. We've got, and Cody, at some point you'll want to jump back on Facebook and take a look through the comment thread on this. Lots of people really interested in some different things. Well, we might want to do one of these specifically. Julie Northrup, who asked some questions earlier about different books, she asked she'd like to see new information on the Deputy Marshal reunion date because she's one of the people that has a large reprint of that photo.
Yes, and a lot of people do. Yeah, we used to sell them down here.
And I think I've got like 5 copies of the reprint starting from the 20s when that started to show up, 20s and 30s over in Oklahoma. But that might be the subject for the next time we get together.
That'd be great. And hi, Julie. Julie used to work here at Fort Smith and was an awesome ranger. Still works with the National Park Service. So thanks for tuning in, Julie. And yeah, again, thanks to everybody who tuned in. The Cargills down in Louisiana, I think, are there too. So hi to them too. So anyways, thank you, Dave, for having me. Always a pleasure. And anytime, I'm here on Fridays, so just give me a shout. Be more happy to talk to everybody, and thanks to everybody for listening. So
all right, yeah, we'll just have to convince the powers that be to let Lauren come in on a Friday one of these days.
There you go. There you go.
Because we keep joking about Lauren, why Lauren isn't here, because Lauren's work week is Sunday through Thursday.
Yeah.
So it's just the nature of
Yeah.
how people need to overlap at a property like what you guys have.
I feel pretty happy to be here, but I'll tell you what, compared to Lauren McLean, I am the B team. Lauren McLean is a vast knowledge level that he's forgotten more about Fort Smith than I'll probably ever know. So I don't mind saying that either. He's great. So.
All right. So anyway, again, thanks to everybody for taking part in the conversation today. We always enjoy it when we have an active chat going on. Thanks again to Cody, and thanks to your bosses for letting you come in. Again, thank you for coming and watching and helping support the Marshals Museum and our programs. If you want to help out, there's very definitely go to our webpage. We've got the Buy a Brick campaign. The first shipment of those actually just recently came in. We're looking at getting those placed within the next few weeks, if not a month. So we're really excited about seeing those in the ground here on the property. We've got some information eventually regarding the 5 tribes that we're going to be mentioning here shortly. We've got, and Julie says thanks. We also have, we're still doing our GoFundMe campaign. You can get to all of that stuff through our webpage. We're always looking at ways to move that needle a little bit further financially, so we can help open up this whole building, so we can share this story better and more easily with everybody who's out there. Other than that, please feel free to spread the word. Please feel free to share that this happens every Friday, 2 p.m. on Central Time, and just follow the Facebook page. And if you have any questions for us, if you have a suggestion for some topic you want us to hit in the future, go ahead and shoot us a note on Facebook. We'll always look at it. If you've got a question about something, let us know. And otherwise, be safe, take care of yourself, and have a safe weekend. Bye-bye.